New York audience.
Hello. Hello, New York. I'm so glad I wore my Mr. Collins shirt. I had no idea what passage was going to be read, but here he is again with us. What a delight to be on this panel of supremely talented, intelligent, funny, wonderful writers. We lucked out tonight, I think. Everyone will agree with me. Here's what I want to do. I have real questions to ask. I want to get to the bottom of some things. We're going to have a great discussion, but because there are 4 of you, I want to begin. We need to establish everyone's Austen persona. We need to do a little quick quiz, just so everyone knows what we're working with, okay? So I have devised for us 3 quiz questions. They're all multiple choice. You don't even need to listen to the question if you don't want to. You can just say A, B, or C, but here they are. And we'll start with Jenny, and we'll go to Vivian. The first question, what is your reason for not marrying?
Oh,
Is it because, like Emma Woodhouse, you need to tend to your hypochondriac papa and enjoy your $20,000 a year? Is it because, like Anne Elliot, you had to break off your engagement, and now, at 27, you are so old that you fear that life has passed you by? Or, like Fanny Price, are you the poor relation, but you still have your principles, goddammit? Jenny?
B.
B, okay, you were like Anne Elliot. You're 27, that's it.
Yeah,
Evan?
life is over.
Yeah.
I'm old.
I'm definitely Fanny Price.
A Fanny Price.
Totally.
Yes,
I'm
stick
the
to your guns.
poor cousin, the crazy poor cousin.
Helen?
Yeah, I'm the crazy poor cousin. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Vivian?
I lost track of who. Please tell me again.
I'm going to give you your options again. Like Emma Woodhouse, do you need to tend to your hypochondriac papa and live off your $20,000 a year? Like Anne Elliot, did you have to break off your engagement at 27, you fear that life has passed you by? Or like Fanny Price, are you the poor relation, but you still have your principles, goddammit?
Actually, I did marry, and I not because of the protagonist of any of the books that you have named, but I resonated immensely to the scene that was just played, most especially, right? I'm sure we can all agree, all of that has survived into the 20th century, where some man is always saying to some girl, you don't know your own mind. You don't know what you need. I know what you need. I say I got married
Excellent.
under that star. Clap. I wish I could see who's clapping.
Okay, second question. Let's establish some tolerance for discomfort so I know how we can what I can throw at you tonight. Would you rather be read to by Mr. Collins, A, B, lectured by Lady Catherine de Bourgh, or C, seated next to Mrs. Elton at a dinner?
Oh.
Vivian, let's start with you this time.
Oh, in that case, I'll take Mr. Collins. I could handle him better than the other two. Yeah.
Helen.
I'd like D sit next to Mr. Darcy.
Ah.
Settled for nothing less. All right, I like it.
I think I've spent my entire life being lectured to by Lady Catherines. So it's something I relish and enjoy.
I'll take Mrs. Elton. I find her pretty hilarious in her awfulness. So yeah, I would quietly take notes and hope she didn't notice.
Oh, well, we covered all the territory. Everyone.
See, this is what I wanted to know. We have to have, yes, and between us all, we can handle all of these annoying foes that Austen throws at us. And it's very important. I would say that maybe we're all the heroes/heroines of an Austen novel. Let the audience decide. All right, final question. Unfortunately, you have been chosen by Elon Musk to pioneer the first trip to Mars. Fortunately, you were allowed one Jane Austen novel to bring. It will have to sustain you as you grow pea shoots and whatever else you're going to do up there. Which one do you bring? Kevin.
Mansfield Park.
Oh!
And can you say a bit about why?
Have I offended everyone?
Why?
I mean, it's my favorite Austen book, and I feel that there are so many layers, and there's so many stories, and there's so many amazing characters. So the richness of it is something that would really nourish me while I cultivate those pea shoots.
Jenny?
I would take Pride and Prejudice because I think it's the most perfect, and its architecture is so sound that it can just survive, countless rereadings.
Helen?
I would take Pride and Prejudice, definitely. Mainly because I stole the plot from it. For the book that sort of made my living, and so perhaps I could pass it on to the Martians for their novels.
This is pretty good. I would take Sense and Sensibility every minute, every time. Yes, because I'm deeply moved by Eleanor Dashwood, who was consigned to a kind of a repressive loneliness. Right, everybody else is talking and right, and taking up all the air, and she is alone with her thoughts. And and her sister says, the two of us. I don't know why. I think I read this recently, where Marianne says, "I who spill everything, you who spill nothing." That always, I thought, the whole book is worth that.
I'm going to throw a wild card in and say I would take Emma.
Oh yeah, we forgot Emma.
Well, yeah, Emma gets forgotten, but it's so hard to read Emma in some ways when you love Pride and Prejudice so much, which I do, because I really think Emma is the anti-Lizzie in a lot of ways. Emma, of course, they both have wonderful happy endings, but Emma just has the happy ending society chose for her. She gets to go off with the man of her appropriate social class, who the rest of the town had designated as her husband, and Lizzie doesn't, but I still love the realism of that and the self-knowledge, the journey to self-knowledge that Emma has to undergo to assume her place in society. So maybe the Martians would come to understand that from my choice. Well, we're already getting at something that I thought would become apparent, and it's becoming apparent rapidly, which is everyone has such a personal connection to Jane Austen, and I think this is clearly so true for everyone as readers, and for you, I'm imagining, and in some cases know that it's also true for you as writers. So I would love to know a little bit about how Austen has informed your writing life. And Helen, because you said you stole her plot, I'm going right to you. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, you.
Fess up.
You're it.
Well, I think Pride and Prejudice was the first sort of, if you like, intellectual novel that I read, the sort of novel you were given at school. And I was completely startled by this emotional honesty about women and this female heroine who was funny, who was plucky, who stood up to men, who was principled and kind and good, and by this narrative voice that was just so funny and ironic, and yet you still wanted to turn the page just as much as you did with Jackie Collins, which I also enjoyed reading because I'm not a literary snob sort of thing. And so I was dazzled by it. And years later, when the BBC did their version of it, which was actually, I thought, brilliant, and the streets of England were empty on Sunday night, and I was writing just a sort of mindless column of sort of peek behind the curtains in someone's life, I just decided to start following the plot of Pride and Prejudice. And I think it is a perfect plot. It's survived so many remakes. I think there's been 17 straight remakes. And then there's also been Pride and Prejudice and Zombies and Mr. Darcy, the vampire, and Mrs. Darcy meets the aliens, and it just goes on, but it still works, I think.
Kevin, can we hear a little bit about how Jane Austen has influenced your writing life?
Well, I came to Jane Austen late in life. I was 15, I think, when I first read Pride and Prejudice, which for me
Almost
was...
as old as Anne Elliot.
Yeah, kind of late, because I read Shirley Conran when I was 11, right? So to discover her at that age, I remember just binging that, and then Sensibility, and then Mansfield Park, because for me, I felt this connection between her characters, this very real connection between, especially the women of Jane Austen, and my childhood and my family in Singapore. So many of the women reminded me of the aunts that I grew up with, and so much of that social interplay, I think, really made its way to Singapore as a, British colony that it once was, that they were sort of trapped in this Austenite world. And so that was my connection to it. I felt like I was reading about members of my family. And that, in many ways, inspired me years and years later, when I read Crazy Rich Asians, where I did steal some plots as well from Pride and Prejudice. But yeah, so for me, it was that connection to home, strangely enough.
Jenny, can I ask you the same?
Yeah, I feel like I'm trying to be influenced right now by Emma, because Emma is, I think, maybe unique among her novels in that it has a real surprise. There's something that we really don't see coming, or that I didn't the first time, and that Emma doesn't. And it really is sort of a jolt, and yet it's totally inevitable. And people have compared Emma to a detective novel for that reason, because she somehow combines the surprise and the inevitability so that the ending is so satisfying. And so I'm very interested in detective fiction, and it was a lot of fun to go back through Emma and look very carefully at how she sort of threaded all kinds of clues through the novel of what was going to happen, and yet she used a lot of sleight of hand, really, to keep the reader looking a different direction so that we actually don't notice it. And so I'm actually trying to write a detective novel, and I have looked very carefully at how she did that, and I'm trying to do it too. So we'll see how it works.
Ooh, I love that. I think one way maybe that she did it was by so subtly but definitely coaxing the audience to identify with Emma that your failures of perception are the same as Emma's failures of perception.
For sure. And also she has a way of presenting this inevitable mate for Emma in such a way that even though that he seems quite inappropriate for no particular reason. It's just very, it's like the magic trick when we're all looking this way and then the guy in the bear costume walks by and no one sees him. It's kind of like that.
Yeah, which is a real psychological experiment. I don't know if anyone has actually seen the video of that experiment that they've done on multiple college campuses, but Jane Austen did it first, and there you have it. Vivian, you're a critic, you're not a novelist.
Right.
But I think, so we relate over that. And I think
I read, though. I'm a big reader, right.
Yeah, but I think Austen herself was a critic in a lot of ways. And I wonder if you as a critic have taken something from her way of seeing.
I'm afraid I'm the outlier here. I wouldn't say she's influenced my writing pretty much at all. But I would say this, as I grew as a reader and then as a writer, looking, quote unquote, at different models of how to approach the whole question of men, women, and society. I mean, the story in Jane Austen is society. It's not men or women, right? Each has their part, and each plays their part. I never thought of her as a feminist. I was always shocked when academic feminists started to take on Jane Austen, because it's a very formal light world, and the men have their roles and the women have their roles, and what she does is what she does with all of that. I did learn from her the marvel of how she does two things in a paragraph in which she gives you not the thoughts necessarily of the characters in the paragraph, but she gives you the hidden social dissatisfaction in that same paragraph. For instance, let's say the Agarth family suspects there's a scandal. They suspect that they're falling out of favor in society. People have stopped coming to visit. Then a morning appears and Lady Ascot is at the door. She is welcomed, and you get a long description of how brilliant the conversation is that follows, interspersed with a paren, which says, of course, she was the only person to appear that day when 20 others were expected. You know what I mean? Am I making myself clear? That's the kind of thing that she taught me to consider, to see how that is done. And that's done throughout the books. That is, in fact, the tone that dominates the books. You get a straightforward description, and then you get this zinger in the middle of it, which tells you what really underlies the meaning of what these people are saying or doing to each other. And, you know, nobody's more brilliant on it than she is. So I wouldn't say it influenced me, but it taught me. She taught me.
Yeah, I think you're talking about irony in large part, which is something that Austen is amazing at. I mean, I would say, and I wonder what you think, I think that's I'm sitting here wondering, the big question is, you know, look at all of us who are here celebrating the 250th anniversary of Jane Austen. It's like she would have found this preposterous, I think. But we get so much pleasure, and these words feel so modern. I think irony is part of it. Humor is clearly part of it. What, like, what else am I?
She'd nail us.
What did you say, Vivian?
She would nail us.
She would nail us. Oh my God, we'd be humiliated. It would be horrible.
She'd be firm. But I actually disagree, if I may.
Yes,
my dear.
Yes, we could have a sort of discourse. But I think she was a feminist even before the word feminist was invented, because she was writing in such a tiny, apparently unassuming way, almost like on a little piece of ivory. But you found out so much through her lightness of touch and her irony, not only about the political situation at the time, the wars, you know, all the soldiers and redcoats coming back, but also about the lot of women. All her heroines are unmarried. They're all caught in that moment between being children, being girls, and being either wives or failures as not wives, left on the shelf, you know, the later image of Miss Havisham. They have no power except to refuse a proposal. They can't choose. And unless they have their own money, unless they happen to be a rich widow, they really have no choice in making a life other than to marry, even marrying someone like the Mr. Collins we just saw. And the thing that's so brilliant about Jane Austen herself was that she actually chose not to. She chose to be a novelist instead. She did have a proposal.
Why do you think she chose?
I know, because I've read up about it. She had a proposal from a man, and it wasn't just the name, but he was called Harris Biggs Withers. But that wasn't the reason she said no. But really, she'd had a terrible time. She'd fallen in love and then been taken away because she was too poor. She'd liked someone else who died. This was her chance to save the family. And she said no. And I think it was partly because she'd seen her sister-in-law die on her 11th child, I think it was. Like, having children was kind of a death penalty for women in some ways. And she had parents who had married for love. And she decided that she was just not going to settle, and she was going to be a writer instead. And she was pretty tough, and she went out there. I think her professional life was a bit like being in the movie business. You know, she had things optioned that were never published and all sorts of difficult deals, and she went out and made the deals herself. So I think she absolutely was a feminist, and she, instead of choosing sort of stridency as her method of communicating, she chose humour and, as you say, irony. really. So she's my hero. She's my feminist heroine. I mean.
That was our defense.
But one thing that's interesting is that while she herself and her life didn't conform to this script of you must marry or be an old maid if you don't have money, her heroines do not. They go along. They do conform. So it's interesting. Her life was much more unorthodox than the lives that she writes about. And I think when people say she's not a feminist, maybe what they mean is that she minds this world with all of its limitations for women, for all of the drama that in a way those limitations help to produce, instead of making it a story about how these limitations are wrong. That isn't really her point. She's just having fun with all of it. And I don't think there's any contradiction there, because the women are just as strong as the men, and as far as I'm concerned, she was a feminist if she believed that and wrote it. But it's interesting that her books don't really question the social order, or not much. I mean, they're definitely obnoxious aristocrats, and you know, we know that class snobbery is really ugly, and Emma is a terrible snob. But the total order and the sort of the fate of women, I think she doesn't overtly question. That would be a different kind of book.
She doesn't question it at all.
Yeah, and she has fun with it instead.
Not at all. And in the end, everyone ends up rich and well-connected, or at least rich, and that's not questioned in the slightest. There's no questioning of the roles that anybody plays in these books. It's all, the real subject is proper society, and she does this brilliant job of jabbing at it all the time, but she jabs at it equally, men and women, and nobody is really objecting. Not really, strike really. Nobody is objecting to their positions or their, I think the men suffer just as much as the women. I mean, they all marry in complete ignorance. They meet, and 2 weeks later, he's on his knees. Oh, my dear. And I mean, these people, they're like arranged marriages. They don't know each other. What's remarkable is how much obeisance is paid to the idea of falling in love, of being in love. Who's in love in any of, I mean, what does it mean to be in love?
I think she
They're like arranged marriages.
I think she really knows what she means by love. I think she means desire and a true meeting of minds.
A true meeting of mind.
Yeah, and I think
she means, maybe this man won't beat me, maybe this man won't lock me up, maybe I will have a bit more freedom than is generally. I think George Eliot's Gwendolen Harleth, she speculates endlessly about what it will mean to marry a man she doesn't know at all. All she does know is that under the law and under all society and law, she will lose every right that any independent human being has. But Austen doesn't get into that at all.
well, it's interesting that she always just stops at the happy ending. She never goes beyond the moment where
She stops at the happy ending.
yeah, she never gets.
What's
into
interesting about that?
Because I think she doesn't.
I mean, yeah, that's right. That's
I mean,
what she does.
it's sort of
It's like a
exactly what you're
Shakespearean
saying.
comedy.
She chooses. There's only sort of 10 stories that you can
Yeah, right,
tell, that
right.
you can hang your themes on,
Right.
or your decoration, and she chooses
Yeah, that's the story she
as her narrative
Yeah.
device the romantic comedy, which by its nature has a happy ending, and she stops before they get into the marriage,
Yeah.
before they get into normality.
I know.
There's something.
And that's what it is. But still,
and they lived happily ever after.
but still on the way, she's telling us so much about how tough society was.
Yeah, on
women.
everybody. Oh,
On women particularly, I think. And she does
guess I
show
don't.
that men have choices that women...
yeah. Well, we don't want to hijack this.
No, we don't. We can, we'll talk
You and I
later.
can definitely.
When we get in the wine bar, we'll get into it.
I do think she did manage to be subversive, though. I
Yeah.
think she was this quiet rebel.
Yeah.
Just by very fact that she took this very stratified, very proper world and truly skewered it in a very hilarious, wicked way, in a way that, a woman in her time and of her class was not supposed to. She was that fly on the wall, observing these people, and then really having fun, caricature, just creating these satires of them.
I'd like to propose something else on this topic. I see it differently than you do, Vivian. And I see it a little bit differently than you do, Helen, I think. Because in each novel, yes, the heroine gets the husband at the end, and it's the husband to whom she's suited. And I totally agree with you that the progress of the novel is about a kind of selection. Each novel is about the heroine of the novel coming to know the man to some degree, but also herself, which is much more important, and which informs her choice, and which is entirely what something like Mansfield Park is about. Fanny Price is pursued and pursued and pursued by someone who she doesn't totally trust, but everything is telling her, go for this man, go for this man, go for this man. He's not ridiculous like Mr. Collins, he's charming, he's wonderful. And he even starts to win her over a bit. And still, she stays with herself and trusts her own mind and learns how to trust her own mind, even when the family on whom she is totally financially dependent, because that is not something Austen hides at all, it is something she puts at the front and center, disagrees with her choice to the extent that they're willing to cast her out, to send her back to her poor family to ruin her. So the books are about self-knowledge, and maybe you get the husband, but it's because of that. But there's something else that goes on in these books, I think, which is that many other women do not have the happy ending, and we see that happen. The brilliance, I think, in part of what Austen is doing is that she lets us live through the experience of her heroine so that we get the satisfaction of the happy ending, and we get the joy, and we get the tears, and we get the wedding and the perfect happiness. But you have, let's not forget the woman who actually does marry Mr. Collins. Because someone has to. And someone does.
Miserable Charlotte.
And it's poor Charlotte. I mean, it would be horrible if we're sitting here not talking about poor Charlotte. Let's all, pour one out for poor Charlotte right now. It's really bad, because for poor Charlotte, she's also getting older. She's not beautiful and sassy and sharp, and she's not the one who we all want to be, dressing up as at the ball. And Mr. Collins is her best shot, and she has to live the rest of her life telling herself, I love Lady Catherine de Bourgh. Hooray, I get to, walk in her garden every Friday or whatever. So Austen is giving us realism and she's giving us fantasy together. And I think that's really one reason why we all still love her, because we recognize both qualities. And we live for the fantasy, we can't help it, we're human, but we see the realism, and it's a little bit of Schadenfreude, Oh, good, I don't have to marry him, but someone does. And that's one thing that I love about Austen.
Fanny Price, you're really loading the dice. If anybody is Cinderella, it's Fanny. And she can afford to, and we can afford to let her go on refusing Crawford, because in the background, we know Edmund is going to come and rescue her.
You don't know that the first time you're reading. You got to go back. You got to go back. You don't know it the first time you're reading. It's just like what Jenny was saying. When you read the books again, you read them with this, and I'm sure here we're all rereaders, and that's another question. Why? Why are we all rereading Jane Austen endlessly? Why is she as pleasurable?
Because she's good.
Because she's good.
She does all the
sentences are good.
things. She does all the things. She does plot, theme, character. You could tell just from the dialogue who is speaking, even if you didn't in a film script have the name, Mr. Bennet, come my dear, you have delighted us long enough. When Mary's been crashing at the piano for hours on end. Everyone has
people
their
I know who read Jane Austen the way I presume you do, they've got thousands of sentences in their heads that are the Austen. I mean, in their heads, I've known people over years who can, at the drop of a hat, produce some incredibly complicated Jane Austen sentence. She is remarkable.
She's really good. And she started Pride and Prejudice when she was really young, like 21. She just had it instinctively.
I think it's also because the time, I mean, it's easy to forget because her books feel so contemporary, and obviously they've been kind of pulled into contemporary life in all kinds of ways, but I mean, she was born before the American Revolution, and she was writing about a time when really all of the technology that we think of as modern, I mean, none of it had happened yet. There were not trains. There were no telegraphs. It is really another time when people lived in a way that they might also have lived, 200 years before. So there's something about that juxtaposition, the modernity of the thoughts and the perceptions and the irony, coupled with this really almost ancient way of life that we're seeing. And I think that's kind of exciting.
You think about the weeks and weeks and weeks they spent just sitting around.
Yeah.
Knitting and doing quadrilles and,
Yeah,
waiting for someone
workbox.
to arrive, waiting for this man to ride up,
Yeah.
once a month, and that would be their adventure, right? So like,
And in Emma, that's kind of manifest. Like there are moments where Austen writes, Emma was feeling, less, the word's not disgusted, but less bored by the world around her than she often was. And you realize how much repetition there was. I mean, a letter arrives and everyone in the town is talking about it for a week. There was the lack of privacy in this tiny world where everyone knew everyone's business. I mean, it would be hard. And Emma gets really sick of it.
Yeah. I was thinking this just yesterday. Well, I did reread one of the books, Persuasion, as I was telling Alexandra before, and there was a paragraph in which Anne Elliot has just arrived at her married sister's home, which is 3 miles from her own home. And it's a whole different set of people. It's a whole different family. And in this paragraph, she says, the first sentence is, how remarkable it was to her that people at Upper Cross were in no way interested in or had any sense that they indulged in a set of conversations and observations, et cetera, that even though they were only 3 miles distant, was so different from, And then follows a paragraph of brilliant sentences, just brilliant sentences about how amazing it is that a family in one house is completely uninterested in what happens in another house. And I thought, nothing is happening here, nothing at all. This is quite amazing. And I'm spellbound reading one sentence after another.
Yeah, it's so true about, in some ways I think we feel so close to this world, and there's so much around the Austen culture that, like the dressing up. Remember that movie that came out a while ago, which was all about people going to Jane Austen summer camp? Where they're wearing bonnets and they're wearing the empire waist gown and the whole thing. And
That sounds like fun.
Is that real?
I know, well, it sounds like fun. It sounds like fun until you think about, where would I
Wearing those clothes.
Where would I be going to the bathroom?
Was that real? That was real?
I don't think it was real, unless,
Oh, it wasn't a documentary.
not that I know of. If anyone in the audience knows otherwise, write it on a little note card, and pass it to us, and we'll correct it. But there is this kind of almost like love for that sense of experience. I mean, I also reread Emma really recently, so it's on my mind too. And 2 things happen in Emma that are considered the height of ridiculousness and frivolity, both of which involve going to London, which is 16 miles away. One is that Mr. Elton, who wants to show Emma how much he adores and loves her, a gesture completely lost on Emma, who thinks that he is in love with her friend Harriet Smith, takes a portrait that she has made of Harriet Smith to London to be framed, which is like, what are you doing? It's like if someone now was like, oh, I have a great guy in Tokyo, and was like, I'll just be back in 3 days. And you're like, what? And the other thing that happens, which is even crazier, is that Frank Churchill, who's only visiting for a fortnight, goes to London to get his hair cut.
Right.
But that's not really why he was going.
It's not really why he was going, but the idea, the whole town, they're still talking about it right now in Highbury. There's still an absolute shock that he did that. It's like, oh my God, you know, and based on, and I think another thing about Austen is, based on that, of course, an entire spider web of speculation starts to form. No one guesses the right reason, but character, which is such a big part of it, character assessment, and everyone's assessment of everyone else's character starts to come into play. Is he more frivolous than I thought he was? You know, one thing Austen really gives us, basically for the first time in English literature, is free and direct discourse. This idea that you're pressed up right next to the character whose eyes you're seeing through. And that allows her to do, Jenny, what you were saying, all these kinds of amazing manipulative things, where because you think you have insider knowledge, you're actually blinded in some way by what's going on in the story. I mean, are there other, you know, narrative techniques or things that you've taken from Austen or that you love her for, that you go back and you think, how did she do that?
Well, I think it's interesting that the novel was quite new when she started writing. It was only about 60 years old. And they were mainly Gothic novels where women were ornaments and that was their role to fit in with what men wanted. So for her to do this peek behind the curtains,
And as you say, nothing's really happening.
but it's really interesting. It's just really interesting what these real women are actually talking about. And she really covers female friendship, love between sisters, which is an actual real part. It's very, if you like, feminist, if you're going to put that label on it. It's the support network that certainly I experience, and most of the women I know experience, of your little posse, or your urban family of friends. And that's what she lets you peek into. She lets you peek into the women just sitting there doing nothing, and what are they talking about and speculating about, and what are their hopes and dreams and sadnesses, and how do they support each other, and which ones behave badly. And she's very precise in nailing who people are. You know, she'll say, vanity was the beginning and the end of Sir Walter Elliot's character. There you are, she's declared it. And it's social observation, but it also spreads very wide. And, you know, she's covering slavery a bit in Mansfield Park, and in Emma, the sudden influx of new wealth at the same time as poverty, and it's just so lightly done. It's like a little duck, but the legs are working really hard underneath. I think she's super smart, and apparently she loved a glass of wine. I think she'd be super fun to go to hang out with, to have in your gang. You know.
I wonder what kind of conversation she would have had with Emily Dickinson. They could have talked a lot about how much time they were spent at home. Now, I thought about that often. The two, certainly they had that in common, right? That they remained the unmarried, hidden writer in the big family, and what that part of the life would have felt like. She never writes about anything, because that's not her subject. You know, her subject is not interiority in any way. It's the whole panorama. Right.
I think you get the interiority within the panorama.
You do?
I think absolutely. I think that's what you're getting a glimpse into. You're getting a glimpse into the minds, and so much of these books are about changing your mind. And I think that's another reason why we go back to them again and again. You have Lizzie Bennet, who thinks she knows about other people, about her world, because as we're saying here, the worlds are small. So you can understand why you think you know it. You've lived in it your whole life. You think you know, you have everyone figured out, and you don't. And you have to learn and be surprised. And that's an interior process.
In Persuasion, Anne Elliot is entirely motivated by her anxiety and regret over the lost engagement to Frederick Wentworth. That's all she ever is, we're told she thinks about. She obsesses constantly about the man she hasn't seen in 8 years and who has come back into, right, we all know him. It is remarkable how little we learn in any particularity of what she's thinking, feeling. We just have the same anxiety. All we ever get is her anxiety about, will he come, won't he come? Will he appear at this event or that event? will he look at me across the table? That's all we ever get. We get in,
But I have a
Who
question.
will speak for Anne Elliot?
Also,
She did when.
what do you mean? I'm just saying.
When Captain Harville was going on about how he'd never read a book which wasn't full of women's fickleness, Anne
Oh,
Elliot
right.
did say, well, they were all written by men. So she
Yeah.
was quite capable of a comeback. You know, she was
No,
quite
I'm just
capable.
saying, in terms of interiority, her one subject, her one concern is this obsession over Frederick Wentworth. We don't hear her thinking about anything else. We don't hear her thinking about that either. I read the book just this week and was amazed at how little. I don't mean to throw a monkey wrench in this conversation.
well, I
Not at
guess
all.
my question for you, Vivian, would be, why do you like the book if it feels so limited in that way? What makes it alive?
The writing itself is indeed her powerful, strong suit. Yeah, those sentences.
Yeah, I think
No,
Persuasion
I
is
mean,
a
I
tricky
just
one.
thought
Persuasion is a tricky one. I think some people love Persuasion and consider it to be the height. It is going in such a different direction than the earlier novels. And for me, at least,
yeah.
it offers this tantalizing glimpse of whatever was going on in Austen's mind, what that next step would have been, because it is so different.
But it's also about not exactly parenting, but older women giving advice generally, giving unsolicited advice to other people, which you're convinced is right, but can be a mistake. So maybe if Anne Elliot was obsessing about a man, 'cause she got nothing else to do except the embroidery, Jane Austen wasn't. She was looking at women of all ages and regret and mistakes that can be made. And I think she as a writer, is always astute and always really looking at the whole span of life
Definitely.
and family. And the interesting thing, she's not very deathy. Even though she suffered a huge amount of loss in her life, that's something she doesn't cover. And apparently when her own father died, she just went quiet. She was trying to write and she couldn't go there on that. So that's maybe why she stuck with the romantic comedies, you know.
Yeah.
She
That's
just
a
didn't
good
want to
shot.
go too deep, maybe.
I'd love to hear from Kevin. I'm interested when you say that you feel like Mansfield Park is subversive. I'd love to get your take on that novel. Because I feel like it's sort of different from the others in certain ways. And I found it really intriguing when I reread it this time. So I'm just interested in another perspective on it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, first of all, you have the character Fanny Price, and to me, she sort of represents this complete outsider, right? She's a girl that's not quite an orphan, but she's given up by her own family and taken in by her aunt's family, right? So she's a girl displaced, but not really an orphan and not really adopted. She's just kept by this family, and so she has to navigate this world where she doesn't really fit in at all. And yet she has to fit in. And I think the subversion is, I think also, the family fortune was made through slavery, right?
And
And she's hinting at, I think it was Sir Thomas's business in Antigua, and yet in a way she's kind of like a slave. She's someone that has been taken away from her family, transplanted into this family, where she's treated very much like an underclass person within this world and has to really navigate in a very, very, quiet way and hold it all in.
That's a really good point.
It's a really good point. I'd never thought of that.
And then
Do
there's
you think she did that intentionally?
I like to think she did. I think it was her quiet way of,
We should give her that credit, I
commenting
think.
on slavery, right?
No, I think that's, and her aunt, not just Lady Bertram, but Mrs. Grant is really cruel to her and really treats her overtly like a servant. But the thing
And you
that's,
see the class systems at play even within one family, right? Where because the sister who married well is in this rich family, her own niece really is treated like an underclass servant.
and Lady Bertram's husband, I guess Lord Bertram, only will take in Fanny Price after being reassured that there's no way she would ever want to marry one of his sons because they would be so familiar with each other. They would really be like brother and sister, so that would never happen. And he's like, okay, I'll do it.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the earlier point that it's not just about happy endings, because you were saying before, Helen, I think, it's where you end the story. Well, Fanny Price's story ends somewhere, but her mother's story is picked up after having made this terrible match to a man who has brought her low, and she has all these children, she has no money, the family has been ruined. If you had ended that story 10 years before, we wouldn't get Mansfield Park, but in fact, Mansfield Park is beginning at the end of someone else's tale and carrying it on. And you do get that wish fulfillment of Fanny being raised above, but it doesn't change where her story began. You're making me think, Kevin, also of, because I do insist on the deep and beautiful interiority of these books, about something really distressing that happens when Fanny is sent back to her own family. And she's been idealizing this home she came from. She's been writing letters home. She hasn't, again, because of the distances, she hasn't been home in years. And
the memory of her childhood and the memory of that affection is preserved in amber.
Exactly.
And then when she goes back to the reality of it, that's completely shattered. Sorry to interrupt you, but
please,
yeah.
Please take it away. I mean, it's exactly that. And she goes home and is kind of horrified by the squalor that her family is living in and that now she has to live in. And what's so poignant about that moment is that, again, it's like a self-alienation. This vision of the self, this person who was at home, her Fanny, kind of before the fall, I guess, the Fanny who has been kept in amber, waiting for her, isn't there either. And she would have been so different, and she is so different now. And I think that's another thing, when you can't go back home. And so much of Austen is about home and finding home and being happy at home. Emma Woodhouse loves her home so much that she moves Mr. Knightley right into it. Yeah. It's like, oh my God, my papa could not go 3 miles away. It will totally distress and vex him. I know Mr. Knightley will move in with us, yay. And then you have Fanny Price, who has no home.
And also it's amazing to see Jane Austen turn her hand to this kind of chaotic, slightly squalid home where the dad is an alcoholic. I mean, it's very surprising material that I don't think we see that in any of her other books.
It's the most shocking scene in all of her work.
It's really, it's amazing. I mean, anthropologically, it's just amazing. Like suddenly we're in a port town, everyone's talking about ships, which of course Jane Austen, who had 2 brothers who were sea captains, that must have been the kind of conversation that was happening a lot in her home, but we don't see it in the book. So I agree. I think, and another thing I love about Mansfield Park is I feel like we get sort of the commentary on the strange, languid life of aristocratic England at that time, where people are putting all this time and energy into doing plays, like there's sort of a naughty play that's going to be put on that it never even happens.
Thank God.
Just, I don't know, the feeling of these 2 very distant, different worlds is really powerful.
And she has to navigate through them.
Mm-hmm. What do you make of all the times she plays on the brothers, these 2 brothers, right? And the heroine, the protagonist, she thinks the one she wants has married when it's the other one who has married. And there's that sensibility. Mm-hmm. And the one you just...
Well, there are 2 brothers.
And also in Persuasion, Frederick Wentworth has a brother. Mm-hmm. And she plays on that a lot. And I never could figure out what that was all for.
I think she likes doing misunderstandings and letters and all those sort of devices. Yeah. I think it's just technique, really.
Just technique.
I think it is,
around.
Yeah.
They suffer so when they think it's the one they want is the one who got married.
Yes.
When,
yes.
Oh no, my dear, it's not Edward. It's not Frederick. It's Edward. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of another opportunity for comedy also, because in Sense and Sensibility, there's a woman, Lucy, who is, I think, right, who's supposed to marry one of the brothers.
Supposed to marry
and he
Howard.
loses his fortune, and she's just like, I'll take the other brother, and that's also funny. And it you know,
Yes,
the
it is funny.
interchangeability
The whole
of
thing
these
is like
brothers to
slapstick.
her
Yeah.
is very funny.
Yeah.
And,
That's true.
you know, great, there was another one around who got the money, so that's it. And it again allows the kind of moral distinctions. I mean, we're gonna move to audience questions in a second, but
You had to be practical. You know? I mean, the Queen Mary did that, you know? Prince Eddie died, she moved on, she married the son,
you have
became
to
the
be
queen,
practical.
right?
But that's something that I think is so amazing about Austen, that she is, in some ways, she's the most moral of writers because she's so concerned with morality, but she doesn't feel moralizing. And how that is such an incredible miracle. Like, no one wants to be lectured. I certainly don't want to be lectured, and I don't want to be told, you know, well, Fanny Price is so good, and look at yourself. No. But, you know, and Fanny Price, it reminds me again, Fanny Price was Austen's favorite heroine of her own, who she created. And that is so telling in its quiet and beautiful way, that someone who wrote all these fiery, feisty Lizzie Bennets and Emma Woodhouse, who Austen referred to as a heroine who no one but myself will much like, which is false, but also when you read the book, kind of true. She's an anti-hero. But she identified so much with Fanny Price, who wants to be good, and yet I think that so much of the genius of Austen is how fun she makes all of this. Like,
and
let's not
Mansfield-
discount fun. It's hard to be fun.
Mansfield Park was her least popular. It was like second album syndrome, and nobody liked it because it was. But I always love the way that, to go back to what you were saying, that her heroines do sort of send themselves up. And when Lizzie Bennet's sister asked when she really fell for Mr. Darcy, she said, I do believe it was the moment when I saw his large house at Pemberley. And I mean, that has got to be ironic, hasn't it?
Doesn't hurt. My last question is about humor, because, you know, Kevin and Helen and Jenny, yes, but I think particularly Kevin and Helen. Jenny's taking the mystery from Austen, but you guys are really you're writing wonderfully comic novels. What about Austen's humor strikes you today as gold?
I mean, it's timeless and universal, and it transcends cultures, and, you know, I could find it funny as a teenager in Texas, as did my aunt living in Singapore in the 60s, as do we all. Here, we all find our touchstones of why it's funny to us. And that's the brilliance, I think, about Jane Austen, is that she was so brilliant and also so beloved, right? Because not all geniuses are beloved, like she is.
And did you steal from her?
Absolutely. I mean, so much of...
From like all of them, or just two?
Yeah,
or?
so here and there, you know, like Pride and Prejudice, the scene where Elizabeth first visits Pemberley, you know, I really took that, and that was when Rachel Chu visits Tarsall Park for the first time in my novel, you know, and certainly even in my most recent novel, Lies and Weddings, there's a bit of Fanny Price in my heroine.
It makes me feel so much better. So.
You steal from the best, right? So, yeah.
You steal from the best.
Yeah.
All right, we got 2 audience cards. Okay. Would any Jane Austen novel adaptation succeed with a gender swap? If so, which novel?
Ooh.
I will say, while you all think about it, that it is another thing that's amazing to me about Jane Austen is how you can transpose. I mean, okay, both of the thieves have confessed to thieving, but it just proves the point. You can transpose so much of the novel into the present day. I'm a huge Clueless fan. I think it's a brilliant adaptation.
So
and the more I see it and think about it, the more I'm like, whoa, she got it all. Amy Heckerling got it all. And Austen has laid out that framework. But the gender swap question.
I'm surprised no one's done it, actually, because they've done it with so many things, haven't they? Like Stephen Sondheim's Company, and I don't think it would work. Otherwise, they would have done it. You know, we've had zombies.
Oh, that's right. There has been one. Thank you. I can't see you, but thank you. Fire Island, yes. Have people seen Fire Island? Has anyone on the stage seen Fire Island?
Is that a movie?
Fire Island is really fun. Oh, that's such a great point. It's a gay male version of Pride and Prejudice that takes place on Fire Island.
I was going to say it would work.
And it's
I think it
great.
would work in a gay environment or gender fluid environment, but it would be hard to just
Who
do
are
a
the
straight
women?
swap.
Who play the women? I mean, who are the women?
They're
They're all men?
It's gender swapped. There's
Gender
one.
swap. So the women are men, and the men.
It's all gay men.
It's all gay men.
It's all gay men.
Sounds great.
You got to see Fire Island. Vivian, you must see Fire Island.
Okay, I
you will like it.
will.
You will like
I'll
it.
go home and see it right away.
It's also, it works also because it is about, again, it's about depth and superficiality, and about the superficiality of evaluating people based on, you know, maybe you have 10,000 a year, maybe you have great pecs. Well, in our society, one of those things is, you know, okay, is a hot commodity, but what's beneath? What's beneath?
Profound. That's deep.
Okay.
All right. Who is your favorite side character in any Austen novel?
That's a great question.
It's a good question.
Oh, that's a good question.
I love the sort of evil brother and sister in Mansfield Park, who basically they kind of don't have a moral compass, and they create all kinds of trouble as a result. I mean, they're the ones who kind of spearhead the naughty theatrical production. In the end, I mean, I'm not sure this happens in any of Austen's other novels, but the brother, and I'm actually forgetting their last name, the brother ends up seducing a married woman, and she trashes her marriage. Her husband leaves her. Is it Crawford?
Yeah,
Okay.
Henry Crawford,
Yeah,
yeah.
so it's Henry, and is it Mary?
Mariah, right? Mariah Crawford.
I love them. They're just such troublemakers, and they're a lot of fun, precisely because they don't have that moral compass. So I would vote for them.
That's true. They're good.
Evil.
Forgot them.
Others?
I mean,
I
mine's
forgot
very
them. They're
obvious
really
and
good.
simple. Oh, sorry.
No.
No. I mean, Lady Catherine de Bourgh,
Lady-
right? Like,
Yeah.
ultimate snobby bitch, right? Like, it's just, you can't, like, she's inspired so many of my characters. I keep going back to her over, talk about stealing again, right? Like, it's the gift that keeps on giving, right? It's this completely clueless woman who's so assured of her place in society that she can just condescend to everything and everyone. And there's something very special about that case study that I just keep unpacking and keep recreating in characters in my books. So, yeah.
You're really in the spirit of it.
Super fan. So, yeah.
Good.
Oh,
Is there a character? Some minor character?
well, the character that I sort of spun off from was Wickham in Pride and Prejudice.
Oh, yeah.
Who actually is quite a boring character. He's a bit wet. He's just there as a plot device. He's like the false love. But then he did give me Daniel Cleaver / Hugh Grant, who frankly wrote, actually, I would say, much better lines than Jane Austen, including, I don't know if you remember in the original film when he's seducing Bridget and she remembers she's wearing giant Spanx. And he says, oh, don't worry, I'm wearing something rather similar myself. Oh, mummy. And I don't think you could imagine Wickham saying something as witty as that, or finding himself in that situation with Lizzie Bennet, though he did with Lydia. But I think, yeah, that sort of third false love was quite a good one for me.
I like the mother in Sense and Sensibility. It's the novel of my heart. She just moved me. I mean, she has thoughts and feelings that are less than comedic, but they're very real. What do I do now? Oh my God, what do I do now? Mm-hmm. I can get into that.
Well, I'm going to speak for Mrs. Bennet because, again, I feel like in every Austen, there's a shadow of a different one, like the good version and the crazy version. And Mrs. Bennet is the crazy version of that mother. What do I do now? What do I do now? I have 5 daughters. I've got to marry them. What do I do? And yet she's totally intolerable and insufferable, but because she doesn't know it and means well, we put up with her anyway. And because we have to.
True.
And because she's hilarious. All right, thank you. I was going to thank the panel, but by all means.
What?
I thought you were going to say something.
Oh, no.
Thank you, esteemed panel. Jane Ives. Thank you, audience.